He was the perfect killer. However, he was powerless to stop his wife's murder on the day he was to retire. Even his lovely daughter was unable to avoid the killer's cruelty. Despite being up against gangsters with firearms, the man fought valiantly. In the end, he gave up in frustration and despair. Luckily, the man was so resilient that he survived a bullet wound to the skull. Unfortunately, he was falsely accused of killing his wife and children before trying suicide because of the killer's manipulation. After 12 years, Dao eventually served out his time and was freed. But because of the gunshot wound to his head, he was unable to take care of himself and was now a vegetative patient. Fortunately, a babysitter was arranged by friends from his previous company, which allowed him to survive. However, trouble discovered him once more the night before he was let free. After finding out about Daoud's condition, the assailant, who had previously suffered a hand injury from Daoud's knife, came for retribution. After a single menacing glance from the man sitting in his vegetative state, the caretaker attempted to step in but ran away in fear. The attacker felt like striking a pillow because he was not satisfied. He ultimately couldn't bring himself to murder him. After a while, a good Samaritan brought Dao to a hospital. He was shocked to learn that the police officer working on his case was one of the murderers who killed his family. Cat's rage flared inside Curly as he remembered the specifics of the murders that night. Under startled, shocked eyes, he miraculously awoke from his vegetative state. He rose gently, then fell back. It wasn't until he was abruptly flung across the room that Curly realized the danger. Only then did he realize the true terror of this erstwhile king of assassins. Luckily for Curly, Dad had just woken up and was unable to exert all of his strength, so he took advantage. Curly escaped and kicked him out, leaving him helpless. Curly was about to permanently silence him when two policemen rushed in. They holstered their rifles as soon as Curly flashed his badge, confirming that he was one of their own. Curly said he simply subdued Dao when he attacked him. Then he requested assistance from the officers in getting Dale back into bed. While the police were preoccupied, Curly shot down after grabbing one's gun out of the blue. The second cop pretended not to notice anything. Another obvious member of the Ghostface group. Unfortunately, a doctor happened to walk by at that moment, and the officer had to silence him as well. But Doyle got back up in that diversion. The three men fought frantically from the bed to the floor after he grabbed Curly by the throat. The cop unintentionally tumbled out the window during the scuffle. When left alone, Curly was invincible. Curly finally paid for his previous murders as the curtain tightened around his neck. Fujita, a close friend of Darrow's, hurried to the hospital upon learning of his injury. Dao had unexpectedly regained consciousness, which stunned them. Meanwhile, everything that transpired at the hospital was known to the Ghostface organization. Soon after, Fujita got a startling text message telling him to heal Dao and bring his body back. Fajita's vehicle arrived at the group's covert plant 30 minutes later. As instructed by his superiors, he had returned Dao's body. Two henchmen verified the identity of the deceased, then, per the boss's orders, threw the body into the waste conveyor belt. The fact that Dao, who ought to have been dead, crept out of the body and returned beneath the henchman's frightened stare went unnoticed. A brutal bloodbath was on the horizon. Just as the guard was ready to let Fajita through, his car arrived at the industrial gates. After hanging up without saying anything, he unexpectedly got a call. He pulled his rifle up and shot. In an instant, the drivers had detonated. No, Fujita also took a blow. He retaliated and killed both guards thanks to his vast experience. Dao, on the other hand, had already eliminated almost all of the factory's small dangers. He was about to approach the boss. His adversary emerged to confront him head-on. He knew right away that something was amiss. However, it was too late. The entire factory was suddenly reduced to rubble when the Ghostface member pressed a button. Amazingly, a few seconds later, Dao gently rose from the rubble. Another shot from the Ghostface member was going to kill him, when Fujita showed up right on schedule, sending the assassin flying after crashing into him. Because he had released his home location years prior, resulting in the murder of Dao's wife and daughter and the ruin of his life, Fujita deserted the organization in order to assist Dao. Now that he was aware of his own limited time, Fujita simply wanted Dao's pardon before passing away. Rather, a chilly bullet impacted his face. Dao was never able to forgive him. In the hold of an abandoned ship, all murderers were forced to pay their blood debts. The more severely Dao thrashed the Ghostface member, the more viciously he questioned him. The individual would not disclose his companion's location. The members of Ghostface's phone rang at that very moment. They noticed that it had the label, "Boss," on it. "Dao, your daughter is still alive," said the voice on the other end. Dao was shocked to learn that his daughter was still alive. Instead of executing the Ghostface member right away, he simply beat him to a pulp for her protection. Dao located a former informant early the following morning, who, as usual, promptly led him to the correct location and left his informant's location. Dao fought his way to the 5th floor and went directly to the security firm he had indicated. At last, he discovered a room that didn't appear like the others entering. He was utterly enthralled with the wall of pictures, but he didn't see anyone inside. It was his own kid who was the girl in the pictures. He was deep in concentration when a man entered abruptly and saw a girl cowering behind the couch. When Dao saw the private pictures of his daughter with this man hanging on the wall, he momentarily gave up on shooting. Dao got into a violent altercation with him right away. I felt that he had played along long enough to put an end to the charade, but his gun abruptly jammed when I made a concerted effort to pretend that his statements were those of an average person. Dao was about to murder his wife's killer when he heard his father turn around and scream. As a blade peered into his flesh, Dao saw a tragic scene. He had to come to terms with the terrible fact that the deceased person his daughter was defending wasn't actually him. Mao hurried ahead and shoved Dao out the window after noticing his injuries. When he went to find Dao, he came upon the terrified girl, and then he disappeared. I was saved by an elderly man who had been waiting below and didn't have time to take him to the hospital. All by used the simplest techniques to treat his wound. But as soon as he was done, he got an enigmatic call. The caller finally disclosed his true intentions when he handed Dao the phone, threatening to come to a certain place right away or he would never see his beloved daughter again. Dao reluctantly complied with the demand for his daughter's safety despite his severe injuries. He grabbed everything but his hidden warehouse, picked out his best weapon off the rack, and drove his battle vehicle to the Ghostface organization's headquarters, where they would meet. They had set a complex trap. Everyone was anticipating their target's inevitable death. They were unaware that Dao had already crept into the building covertly. With his cleaver in hand, Dao swiftly emptied this magazine, yet he was not at all put off. He quickly got rid of every henchman on the basement floor. However, this was only the start. He was in for a terrible gauntlet. With such little room to move, Dao faced a fresh wave of adversaries as he followed the passageway to the stairway. After intense combat, he was confronted with an even more formidable obstacle. There were bodies all over the stairwell. Even though he was weak and had minor injuries, Dao persisted. As soon as he left the stairway, Long Mao, who was concealed in the shadows, used his position to make a surprise attack. Although he was able to puncture Chao's abdomen, Dao's fortitude was remarkable. Despite being stabbed, he was still able to fight. Following a fierce battle, he took advantage of the situation to hurl Wong across the room before launching a brutal blow that seriously injured his opponent. After I made one more, desperate attempt, Dao grabbed his dagger and wounded him in the eye, rendering him helpless. As long as I tried to escape, Dao used a single slash to finish him. Numerous additional henchmen descended from the higher stories just as Dao believed he could regain his breath. The sounds of vicious fighting filled the building once more. After what felt like forever, Dao discovered his long-lost daughter on that floor when he eventually entered the conflict. Before he could say anything further, she merely shook her head in surprise when he asked if she recognized him. He was struck in the head and rendered unconscious. Dao woke up to find himself in front of the man who had orchestrated all of this, a man who had become mayor after a series of dubious activities. Everyone heard a narrative from the mayor. Every 100 years, a ghost would take possession of a local citizen and go on a murderous rampage, earning New Bridge the nickname Ghost City. Dao, in his opinion, is this ghost who hasn't fully developed to see the ghost's actual strength. In order to assist Dao in becoming his ultimate form, the mayor made the decision to murder his daughter. All of them abruptly jumped in to seize the opportunity at that crucial moment. "Run!" Dao yelled at his daughter. The girl's early memories were immediately evoked by those remarks. She rushed frantically for the exit, knowing that this was not the time for a reunion, while Dao, fighting with fresh strength despite suffering serious injuries, managed to guide the girl to safety while fending off all chasing thugs under his cover. He killed the most powerful Ghostface member in return. By this time, he had exhausted all of his remaining energy and fell to the ground. Suddenly, the mayor rose slowly to his feet. He approached the deceased Ghostface member and carefully took off his mask, exposing a face that was just like the mayor's. The man had no sign of grief at seeing his sibling dead in front of him. He put on the mask that represented the Ghost King getting ready to put an end to this 10-year conflict. That was his limit by now. His resolve to exact revenge on his wife was the only thing holding him upright. He continued to assault, inflicting fresh wounds on his body until his adversary took advantage of his weakness and cut off one of his arms. Dao made no move to back down, not even with one arm. He kept attacking and tripped over himself, but he could still fight despite repeated efforts as long as he had blood in his veins. In that instant, he finally grabbed a chance. After killing all of his adversaries, the mayor appeared to actually see the ghost of Newbridge. Dao was no longer able to stand. He plummeted down the steps. However, his daughter had returned, and he saw her before he passed out. Now the girl remembered her dad. The enormity of what had happened that night made her approach Dao with trepidation and give him a gentle embrace. Following reports, the administration sent out dozens of ambulances and police cars. However, the fact that one of the Ghostface members had escaped was something Dao could never have predicted. The mayor appeared on television a few months later. Since he had lost his attractive face in the accident, everyone felt sorry for him. But the reality was only known to Dao. The initial mayor was not this man. The man visited his family's old mansion after the interview. He eagerly put on his brother's mask after picking it up. He was going to be free of his brother's shadow from now on. He even started dancing in the courtyard to celebrate. However, he saw a startling scene while dancing. The only person in the leaving automobile was the female. Does fate require no more justification? The girl would carry his hopes with her as she embarked on a new, happy chapter in her life, despite the short time she spent with her father.